Fine first.
This is a hybrid meeting. We have one member of the Finance Committee on Zoom and remaining members are here. I have to do a roll call and indicate who is where under the rules. So we have Barry Kaufman on Zoom. We have Karen Skelton present, as well as Josh Levy, John Connolly. We have Carol Fischetti and Paul O'Connor. Absent is Jim Healy, and I am present, Louise Miller, chair. So I will start with any citizen requests to address. Oh, you have.
Madam Chair, before we
Yep.
begin, I'd just like.
Good.
I'd just like to announce for those who don't know, the sad news that Ford Peckham passed away on Friday.
Yes.
As you know, Ford was a former member of the Finance Committee, a town meeting member for many years. Wonderful man, 80 years old, lived a great life. And I just wanted to make note of that, let everyone know for those who don't. And then if we could just have just a short moment of silence, just to have Ford in your thoughts and prayers.
Of course, thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so now we will move on to agenda item number 1. Any citizen request to address the Finance Committee?
Yes, right here.
Yes, please join us and if you could introduce yourself, please, for our
Yeah,
minutes.
sure. Absolutely. Good
Excuse
evening.
me, can I just, is this recording, Dave?
It is
Okay.
recorded.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Doug Katz. I'm a Needham resident, and I have a daughter who's a junior at the high school and a son who is in 7th grade at Pollard. I'm a board member of Needham High School Friends of Music, or FOM. Yesterday, FOM sent a letter to your committee, as well as the school committee and the select board, asking that any cuts to the badly needed theatrical sound and lighting updates be reconsidered and funded. We also asked that a part-time technical director position be funded as part of the current budget. Also yesterday, Kathy Memory, a fellow FOM board member, and 2 Needham High School students, including my daughter, shared public comments with the school committee before its discussion of the upcoming budget. These speakers again urged funding for these updates and the technical director and explained how challenging it is to put on a production with the current facilities. We were very pleased to then hear during discussion that the school committee and Dr. Butenkast are actively discussing this issue with all stakeholders, including hopefully funding design work for Newman in the current budget, so as not to further delay the implementation of that needed work. We're grateful that this important issue is being actively discussed by so many. Friends of Music urges you, the Finance Committee, to now prioritize these needed investments in today's discussion and this current budget. In addition, we want to share the following comments. It seems clear to FOM that these performance facilities, which serve all of the Needham community and not just theater students, have suffered from years of neglect because no one has been responsible for or prioritized their maintenance. We believe it is important that someone take more ownership of these spaces. We continue to ask that a part-time technical director be funded now. This person would assist our theater and music teachers in managing these outdated facilities for current productions while longer-term updates are planned. We ask that the town prioritize a plan and funding for work at the high school, which is also badly in need of basic upgrades and maintenance now and not many years from now. Friends of Music looks forward to working together with your committee and other stakeholders to ultimately support the construction of an updated facility at the new Pollard School. But that will be years from reality. In the meantime, Friends of Music asks that the current budget fund badly needed updates to Newman and the high school, as well as a part-time technical director to oversee our existing facilities. I know you guys don't make any sort of up or down decisions on these sort of line items, but we wanted to come and sort of speak our piece anyway. And
All right, of course, thank you, thank you. Yeah, and I was actually about to say that the Finance Committee really just votes a number for the school department operating budget. To the extent anything, however, is part of capital planning, that is addressed separately during the town meeting warrant process, which occurs a little bit later.
Okay.
And you have a member of the school committee behind you nodding. So, and does anybody else have any comment? All right, thank you. Are there any other, oh, Barry, did you have something? Or you were just moving your hand around? You're all set. Excellent. All right. Are there any other citizen requests to address the Finance Committee tonight? No, then we will move on to approval of minutes of prior meetings, and then we'll move on to the housing. There were two sets of minutes that were distributed to the finance committee minutes of, I believe, October. Oh, I forgot the date. 4th and October 30th. Yeah. So did everyone have a chance to review them?
We have, and I knew their acceptance.
All right, do I have a second?
Okay.
Okay, I will take a roll call vote. Barry?
Yes.
Karen? Yes. Josh?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carol? Yes. Paul?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right, so now, meeting with the Needham Housing Authority. Thank you for coming tonight.
Shall we come on?
Yes, please. So we received a request from the Housing Authority to speak with us early, in the process. The Housing Authority has revised what we had discussed previously, I think now for a couple of years with respect to, Linden Chambers. And it looks like there may be a warrant article or two that address the project this year on the at town meeting. And they want a chance to speak with us early on. I have limited the time because we're in the middle of budget, but if you, and thank you for sending us all your materials ahead of time.
You're welcome, Madam Chair. I'm Reg Foster. I'm the Chair of the Housing Authority. And I'm going to just briefly introduce who's here tonight. Turn it over to Margaret Moran and for 10 minutes of presentation and the rest Q&A, if we can try to do that. Margaret is the Deputy Executive Director of the Cambridge Housing Authority, but also the leader of our project effort for the last 2.5 years to get to the point that we are at this spring, and hopefully at town meeting. I'm just going to do this in order of, here we have Bob Smart, our local zoning attorney, who needs no introduction to most people. Mac Zajac is the day-to-day senior project manager for our effort here. I don't think we have anyone else down there. We have over here two very interested board members, Penny Kirk and Ed Scheibler, who's in support status. And I believe we have in the attendee, if maybe we can promote it. I think there's Dan Chin there. He's our architect. He won't be presenting, but if any architectural questions come up, he'll be available. So with that,
Thank you.
introduction.
You're gonna have to give me time to navigate all these.
Okay.
Name.
It's Dan Chen, number 2 there. There we go.
This, and now we come back to Sharon.
Yep. So Margaret, maybe you can take it away from
Just
here.
hoping to go right to slide number 2. So just our agenda for tonight, just introduction of the team, the project, the financing, because we're in front of the finance committee, some impacts on town services and pilot, and then just how the housing authority will go about managing it. Go on to the next slide. So the Needham Housing Authority, celebrating its 75th anniversary this year, has been working on the chambers really after they finished High Rock, which was in about 2010. So it's been a long-term effort. As Reg said, Cambridge Housing Authority has been the development consultant since mid-2020. So we've been here 3 years. We're joined by Attorney Smart, who's been helping us on a variety of zoning related issues. And then Dan Chin from the Bargman Henry and architectural firm. They started a year ago, but we've been working as a coordinated group really for a number of years and have really made some nice progress as you'll see. On the next slide. So I'm going to turn this to Matt, who'll talk a little bit about the schematic design and where we've landed for the design, and then we'll go right into the financing.
Thank you, Margaret. Just very briefly, the proposed plan replaces the 72 existing studio units at Linden Street State Public Housing property with a 136 unit building split into 2 wings, which we refer to as phase 1A and phase 1B. They'd be financed as a single project. The BH+A team, we think, has done a really nice job of balancing the priorities of the housing authority, including preserving the existing units and adding new 100% affordable units. Your packet includes a fuller view of the schematic design. And we have Dan to answer any questions. Next slide, please. Transitioning into the financial summary of the project, we wanted to highlight the pre-development sources. So this is the budget that gets the project through to construction loan closing. We estimate that the pre-development budget will be roughly 2.6 million, with two primary sources: awarded CPA funds to date and a allocation of ARPA funds of 1.25 million. The primary use for these funds is the architectural services provided for BH+A, roughly 72% of the budget, broken down across several phases and released by the development team only as progress warrants it. The other major line items include consulting services and legal services. And then we'll pass it back to Margaret to go into how the budget gets us through construction to completion.
And I'll just say, we purposely sized the pre-development budget to get to financial closing because we need to have a contractor hired and prices, and so they need to do 100% construction drawings, and so that's why the architectural fee is the highest part there. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is just an overview of the project financing. The project's 100% affordable, deeply affordable at that, because there are different types of affordability, but this project is 100% deeply affordable, and we loses, as you can see, 14 different sources of funding. And we'll go into each of those in a little detail momentarily. But the overall project cost is just over $83 million, funded through the 14 sources. And then the uses, what we're spending our money on, is to the right, and construction cost and contingency make up 76% of the overall budget cost, with financing fees, and other soft costs being the balance. And oftentimes we get questioned about the financing fees and why they're so high. That relates to the access of the low-income housing tax credits. Is a component piece of accessing the tax credits is you have to use private activity bonds for at least 50% of your project costs. And so even though you may have other funds that could cover project costs during the construction period, you have to use at least 50% of the cost through the bonds that are issued on behalf of the project. And that just in general adds to project costs and sort of stands as an outlier, because you would look at that and say there's a way, has to be a way, and there should be a way to do it less expensive. But I've been doing this for a long time, and it unfortunately is the cost of accessing those tax credits. If we go to the next slide, it really kind of hones into the various different types of funding. And the first two are the tax credit equity, and there are two types that we envision for the project. Is the low-income housing tax credit, which is a federal tax credit, and then there's state tax credits. And that makes up 39% of the budget. And those are my favorite sources because there are sources that don't need to be paid back. The entities that invest the funds into the project are getting the tax credit as their return. And as a consequence, we're required to keep the property affordable. So it aligns to the housing authority's mission, affordability, and then it provides a benefit to the investors that allows the funds to come to the project without having to be repaid. And then the next largest source is the permanent loan, which does have to be paid, and now it's about 18% of the budget. And so those combine to 57% of the overall budget. And with it being deeply affordable, it opens the door to be able to get a variety of different soft funds to the project, and that funds the balance of the cost. So the tax credit investors tend to be a private investor. It is typically a bank or a syndicator that comes through. They pay a certain price for each credit, and they really are just motivated by the credit, and all of that. The hard debt is supported by a mortgage placed on the property, and you have to have a sufficient amount of income to pay for that mortgage, and they underwrite you very much similar to how they would underwrite anybody buying real estate, making sure that the loan to value doesn't exceed, and then checking to see if there's a reliable stream of funding or income to pay for the debt. And for us, we're not relying solely on resident rents because resident rents are fixed at 30% of their income. So we're relying upon operating subsidy that will be provided for the project, primarily through the federal government, through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, using a couple of different types of vouchers, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But it's that voucher income that is really the source that gives the bank the comfort to pay, because, you know, sometimes residents will lose their job, their income will go down, their rent will go down to a very nominal amount, but the bank obligation doesn't go away, so the subsidy is intended to cover that. As I mentioned, there's a few different types of vouchers that are in the project. There's some that are being provided directly by the Needham Housing Authority. Those are 12 vouchers. There's others being provided through the Rental Assistance Program, which is a program that's about 10 years old that HUD created that would provide 100% vouchers. Those are not quite as valuable, and we'll see in a moment, as a normal voucher, because they're really based off of the public housing funding stream, and so they're about half as valuable or half as funded as a normal voucher. And then the third voucher type is one that would be provided by the state through the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, and that would be a full voucher. So it's bringing the three different vouchers together to bring sufficient income and sufficient operating subsidy to underwrite the deep affordability for all 136 units. So go to the next slide. So the soft funding comes through a variety of programs. You know, it's really like you're building a layer cake or of funding to really, you know, put together the different sources so that you can pencil out the deal. And fortunately, in Massachusetts, there's a variety of different funding programs available that housing authorities and other private affordable housing developers lean into to move forward a project. And we've listed out the ones that we've identified for potential use on the Linden project, and some of which we've already have in hand, and some of which are still being sought. But those are the types of funding that, as an affordable housing developer, we routinely apply for, receive, and get funded to allow a project to move forward. The CPA funding has been critical to date. I mean, we really would not be here in front of you with a viable project if we had not received such a commitment from the town in terms of being able to do the design and the pricing, so that we know it's a project that can be afforded, as well as all of the due diligence that the legal team has done, as well as the development team, in terms of putting together the numbers. And oftentimes it's the pre-development costs. The pre-development funding is some of the hardest funding to get, and you know, we just would not be anywhere without that. We are coming in for a substantially larger increase, and that would be funding entirely the construction cost of the project, so would not be used until construction was underway. And the return for the town of Needham in terms of CPA funding or local funds is, for every $1 of local fund, it's $10 of leverage. So that's a really great return in terms of the community's investment to upgrading and improving the housing as it exists in Linden, and then adding new affordable units as well. And then the other sources are just, you know, cash flow during construction, the deferring a portion of the developer fee, and something that we'll talk about in a moment is potentially waiving the building permit fee as terms of the town. Moving on. So the project's kind of where we are to date. The top number where we have pre-development that's been secured, funds that have been received and are being used right now. And then we have funds that we either have been allocated, but we can't use yet because the state has to approve it in their yearly bonding account, or funds that we've applied for or need to apply for. So we had submitted a pre-application in November, but we're not quite ready enough. Got to be shovel ready for them to fund the project. We're pre-shovel ready, I'm going to say, because we really don't have our zoning yet, but we're getting very close. And the response we got from the pre-application was they really think that the project will be really competitive the next funding round, which we'll start again next October, November. So I think it was good because we got on their radar screen, and the feedback we got was excellent. And then the balance of the funding are tax credits that again you applied for with the state. It had been first come, first served, so you would get in line, get a queue. But, in full disclosure, the, private activity bonds that are used for the tax credit right now are oversubscribed in the state, so the line is, a little bit longer, but there is actually legislative relief, pending in Congress that, could potentially double the amount of bonds that are available. If you have a project ready to go, then you'll be one of the ones who will be able to go right, from start to finish very quickly. And then, some other funds from the state in terms of new production, and then we'll be applying for local home funds, and then leading into some of the energy funding that's available, that's come out of the Inflation Reduction Act and other, programs. So those are the kinds of the funds status where we are right now. And go to the next slide. This just talks a little bit about the operating income and how we're sizing, how we're getting up to the operating income. You can see what the voucher income is for the 3 different types of vouchers that I referenced, what our operating expenses are, and then how that translates into the permanent debt. So kind of lifting kind of under the veil a little bit in terms of how the numbers work a little. So the 2 of the 3 vouchers, I call them full value vouchers, because those are vouchers that HUD funds at a fair market rent and come with a really nice rent. That's a rent that you would see in the private market. And you'd like to have 100% of those units, except we can't access 100%. Needham has a very small program that it operates itself. It's only 123 units. And they're out and being used right now, so they can't be repulled and reallocated and used for Linden Chambers, nor can a housing authority do more than 20% in that capacity where you would attach it to a unit. And so we've maximized what Needham has to offer, which is 12, and then maximize what we can get from the state, which is 24. But we've matched them or married them to the Faircloth, the RAD vouchers that comes out of the housing authorities repositioning its federal portfolio. And those vouchers are, as you can see, a little more than half of as valuable, I'm going to call it, in terms of what they provide for subsidy. But what it does provide is it provides the housing authority enough income to be able to maintain the full affordability of the units to the residents, so that a resident's rent is truly based on their income, 30% of their income. So if you have slightly higher income, you'd be paying slightly higher. If you have very little income, your rent would be very little. Where absent that, you would have just a flat rent, which would be somewhere around $1,500 or $1,600 that a person would need to pay. And if you have very little income, that's not a rent that you can actually achieve. So the Faircloth to RAD is really valuable that way. It does produce about $1,500 of income, which is critical, because one of the questions we always get is, great, you're going to do new construction, but you haven't done a good job maintaining what you had. So what certainty do we have that you're going to be able to do a better job? And one of the things we're doing is fixing the operating budget and actually having it be a real budget. So the state public housing program, no shock to many people, is actually very underfunded. Nobody can run a program at a cost of $6,000 per year and expect that it's going to be high quality, good conditioned, well-maintained housing. It's been starved for decades, and it is reflective not only what you see when you drive down Linden Street, but if you were to drive down any number of communities of state public housing, it's just been really starved. So here our operating budget is over $10,000 per unit. So we've really right-sized it and really matched what the ongoing expenses that we see, as a provider of housing across our portfolio, and what we've seen privately in terms of being able to maintain it. So it's much more robust in terms of maintenance and ability to operate and take care of the property than what we have right now. But then what the combination of the RAD vouchers and the other vouchers create enough income that's above and beyond the expense, so that we're able to afford a mortgage. So, you're able to, with, the underwriting at a 6% interest rate or 40-year amortization, which is what we're seeing in the market right now, be able to borrow $15.5 million that you would pay using that extra income over a period of time, very similar to what a private homeowner would do, or someone else who has running an apartment building, and then size with sufficient cash flow. The other thing that we're doing is funding a replacement reserve so that we're starting to project for the fact that we're gonna need to do capital reinvestment in the future. And, you know, that size based on, you know, a report that says what the capital needs ought to be over our period of time. Going on, because I'm running out of time. Just quickly, we put it in your packet, the minimal impact on services, you know, the elderly and disabled, so they're not gonna be using schools. You may be able to see a little bit more pickup, because it's just the population will have picked up for police or ambulance, but not anything out of the ordinary. And in fact, you know, with the units being right-sized and larger than what they are, being fully, you know, being much greater accessible, you hopefully would see ability of people to actually be more effective in being able to live in place. And then probably the highlight is just the project will not worsen the local flooding. I think I've certainly seen pictures of the flooding that happens now and again. That's a systemic problem in the town. It's not being caused by anything on our site. In fact, we'll be maintaining and managing all of our water on site, and hopefully that will help the neighborhood, but it's certainly not going to resolve the flooding that is happening in the neighborhood because of sizes of pipes and all. Moving on, just a couple of areas where right now the property doesn't pay property tax. We have to ask and hope that the town will continue to extend that privilege to us. It's an important element because, you know, every dollar, if we were to pay $1 of annual real estate tax, it costs us $15.80 in financing. You know, that would be debt we wouldn't be able to afford. But, you know, the property is under a cooperation agreement with the city now and does not pay taxes. And that extends from when the property was deeded over to the housing authority by the town back in the 1960s. And we would be looking to have that continue. And then the other area where the town could be really beneficial to us is kind of the waiving of the local building permit fees. It really adds up. The fee is estimated to be $1 million, and that's a way that the town can really, again, provide a soft contribution to allow the project to move forward as presented. And then just the last couple of slides are really talking about the management of the redevelopment, because we wanted to assure you that the team that we have in place is capable of, and has done these types of projects in the past. Reg and the Needham Housing Authority hired the Cambridge Housing Authority as their developer based on our experience developing, serving as the Cambridge Housing Authority's developer. We've done all of that work in-house. We're probably the premier housing authority in the country that does its own development, and get phone calls not only from other housing authorities in Massachusetts asking, can you come help us do theirs, but we actually are working with, you know, New York City and helping them figure out how they can tackle almost an insurmountable project problem of how to finance their redevelopment efforts in their community. So we're have a lot of credibility, a lot of accomplishment, and we've been really pleased to serve other housing authorities, Needham being one of about 15 that we're working with right now to provide the talent of our team to help the local community solve their problems with their housing. So we much larger, obviously. We have 3,000 units in Cambridge that we own and manage, a budget of $200 million. Since 2010, we've leveraged over $1 billion. So 83 million, you'll say, how confident are you about that? I'm $1 billion confident because we've been able to raise the funding for every project that we've started. You know, we don't know the word no, and we don't know the word how. We don't shy away from hard work to do what it takes to get a project over the finish line. And we've at this point converted about 98% of our units from the federal public housing program to the voucher program. We do all of our construction administration. Go to the next slide, in-house. So I oversee the planning and development department. That's the folks who do the upfront work, like Matt and Chris, who's on the Zoom. But I also oversee the construction team that then, as the projects move into construction, we hand it over to our construction team to make sure that what we've wanted, what our plans show, what we've hired the contractor to do actually gets done. So we have 10 construction project managers. They're led by Goran Smeljak, who's the director of construction, and under my supervision, he has incredible experience. He came to us, having served as the Chief Inspectional Service, the Director of Inspectional Services in Somerville. The guy knows the code like nobody's business, and it has just been an exceptional addition. He's been with us over 5 years, but has over 20 years of experience, and is put together an exceptional team that oversees construction. And they've overseen a lot of construction right now. We have over $150 million underway right now. But during COVID, we had 6 projects underway, over $250 million, 3 at elderly sites. And we were able to continue to have construction move forward once we kind of paused and put in place the safety elements that you would want to see with the challenges of COVID. But we've been able to continue, we were able to continue and deliver our projects on time and on budget, even in the midst of a pandemic. And then just to kind of finish, the next slide just lists the projects that we've completed since 2010. So I've had a hand in every single one of them. And the over $1 billion of financing that we've raised. And we're very proud of the one that's at the top, because that's our first project with a partner housing authority where we have moved into construction, and we closed on the financing in May, and construction's underway. It's a building, folks know Medford at all, right behind City Hall. That's pretty prominent if you drive up 93. And that's a $141 million project, $105 million of construction that, again, we put that together, the financing, and Goran and his team are doing the construction oversight. So we have an unparalleled track record of accomplishment. I invite anybody who would like to come to the city of Cambridge and see how we're reinventing and reinvesting in public housing, because it's not what you expect. It's so much better. And I measure it by when we have our rededication ceremonies, the feedback that we get from our residents, which is really why I do this work, which is that they feel a level of being seen and respected that they've never experienced in their life, and to be able to be part of that story for the Housing Authority in Cambridge, and certainly for the Needham Housing Authority, has been a real privilege. And we look forward to continuing working with the Needham Housing Authority and with all of the various boards to achieve your vision of Linton Street, and have that same kind of accomplishment celebrated in a few short years. Sorry, I always take longer.
That's all right, that's good. Okay, so we had envisioned just question and answer if there were specific questions or specific items that we'd like more information on when the Housing Authority comes back to talk about any of this. So I will just open it up for questions.
So
Comments?
Madam Chair, I have lots of questions.
I do too. I have a lot of questions.
I'm sure others
too.
do. I think the
Yeah.
best use of time maybe for us to get all of our questions into one place and then transmit them
We can do that. Yep.
to them, because I think we've already gone past the time allotted for them, and I just think it would be more. I know we can spend an hour on questions,
Yeah,
and I don't think
easily.
my questions are any more important
Than anybody else's
questions.
questions.
So
Yeah.
I think that would be the best way to streamline it.
So the one thing I would ask though is when we put together our questions, certain things are gonna be warrant articles, others are questions that may be related to the project, or maybe direction to the Housing Authority on other boards, or, other things that we may have questions on. So if everybody could just divide them up that way, so I don't have to do that. And you can send me your questions. Okay, all right,
May I make a suggestion?
yep,
Just a little bit of an update on other boards. So, yesterday, the planning board met and approved the final draft of the warrant article
oh, the
language.
final draft already.
The final draft already, and Bob can answer any questions you want about that. But they voted to unanimously forward it to the select board for consideration next week. And the public hearing on the zoning is scheduled for the 27th of February.
So is that the same language that we already received? Were there any changes? If you could,
Small changes.
okay,
A comma here and a word there, but it was otherwise identical, yes.
okay,
And then the second update is the CPC. In the form of questions, I will just share this with you. They've given us 40 pages of questions to answer and done an incredible job doing that. And before you
yeah,
invent
that
new
was the draft,
questions,
yeah.
maybe if you might find most of the questions answered there already. They had a first whack at us a year ago, so we started off with all those questions from last year. And they managed to enumerate, and then also a great improvement over last year, in case there's anybody in this room that didn't understand anything that Margaret was saying, just in case, they had us develop I've got a few copies here, a 4-page glossary of terms, you know, and all the acronyms and everything else and so forth and so on, that's attached to the end of that. And then if you look at the first page of that Q&A document, the one I just shared with Louise, you see there are about 20, the box, see where it says box Verizon? Those are 20 hot links that connect to about 500 megabytes of additional information about the project in various different information. You want to see what the schematic design looks like in gory detail, then you can look at it there or download it from there and so forth and so on. And so if I may offer a suggestion, maybe the thing to do would be to first review that and then see if there are any additional questions that come at it from a more of a finance committee perspective. And it's not uncommon for that to happen during the process. And the CPC is scheduled to do their first review on Wednesday, the 24th at 7 o'clock. So there will be a one agenda item CPC meeting, and we will do their version of this presentation. And particularly, they've had that questionnaire for about 2 weeks now, and they will be asking questions about that.
So unfortunately, we meet the same night as CPC, so.
But fortunately, we now record everything. So, you know, that's available for looking at something like that.
Okay.
And I think that's the update.
Go ahead.
Somewhere in here, is there like a timeline?
Yeah, that's,
Yes, there is,
couple of things.
there's a Gantt chart, in, you know, there's a timeline in Word
I
form.
remember seeing the Gantt chart.
And the Gantt chart's not in there, but it's in one of the documents that you can click and download from. Because some of these documents are, you know, too large to sort of attach into one whole document here.
The other, like, very broad question I would ask is if one of the funding sources, you have a long list, somehow falls through, what is your plan B?
Now give
So-
that to Margaret here.
Well, I mean, we really try to cultivate a list that we have confidence in. And sometimes you do have to apply, you get rejected one time, then you reapply, and then you get approved the second time. So, you know, those are the typical sources that projects lean into. And then it's just about, you know, the timing of your application and what resources are available. And so I mean, you know, we put in a full list because the project is, you know, requires that level of sources to be able to pencil out. And I really feel confident that we don't have anything in there that I think wouldn't be achievable.
And to combine your answer and John's question, the Gantt chart, the high level milestones are hopefully to get town meeting approval of the zoning and the $5.5 million CPA funding application this spring at May town meeting. Then the planning board is scheduling a site plan review in June, and to go through the gory details formally of what we are proposing to build, and hopefully approve that during the summer. The fall of 2024 is when the annual funding cycle starts for all those funding sources that Margaret went through very quickly. It's called One Stop because the state has organized them all into one common application that you apply for everything. And they go through their whole process, a competitive process, that's tax credits and everything. And they announce their funding decisions in the early spring of 2025. Should we be able to, you know, win the funding in the, you know, competitively in the first round, then we expect to start construction in mid-2025. Construction of the first half, the first wing of the
1A.
building, yeah, 1A.
And the other kind of safety valve that you often have is looking at the design and seeing if you can value engineer out something that would, you know, fill in a gap. And oftentimes it's not that you haven't gotten the funding sources, it's something has gone up in price. And we've certainly seen those challenges, both the cost of money has gone up as and we've been in an inflationary period with construction now. Prices are starting to come down a little bit, which has been encouraging, and interest rates are coming down a little bit too. What it will be when we go out, I stopped my crystal ball reading long ago. But usually you include, some kind of alternates in the construction to be able to be your safety valve. And that would again be in play too, as we were, if for some reason one of the funding sources that we expected didn't come through.
But do you start? You don't start construction until you have all the money.
Correct. Yeah, you can start. Yeah, and you can't start until you can actually pull a building permit. As well, so you get to the investor and the lenders are really gonna be doing everybody's fiduciary responsibility, because they're not gonna wanna put their tax credit investment money in unless it's a solid deal. And it's ready to go, because then they'll be tying up their money, and the bank is not gonna sign off on the loan documents unless they agree that it's ready to go. So you have to have your construction contract in place. You need to have payment and performance bonds from the contractor to ensure performance. And you have to have your building permit in place, because they don't want to risk that you haven't done the work you needed to do with zoning to actually be able to pull a building permit. And so those are the conditions that have to be in place before you can hit the closing table, and you have to close before you can issue the notice to proceed on construction.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Well, thanks for
Review.
squeezing us in.
Yeah.
Busy budget season. Really appreciate it. And we'll be back, I imagine.
Oh, you'll be
Hearing
back.
more.
Yeah.
When do you want them to happen?
Oh, it won't happen until,
After budget.
no, well, yeah, I mean, we put together our first draft of the budget third week of February. So after that, sometime.
Okay, probably after the fact, then, planning board public hearing.
When is that?
February.
Yeah, it'll be after that.
And
Yeah.
the CPC public hearing is scheduled on the 13th of March, you know, tentatively, so.
Okay, and they'll consult with us before.
Cecilia and Lauren, they have all the dates all mapped out for us staff wise here, so. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I will email you that
All right,
document. I just gave you a hard copy and
We'll
send a
send
copy
you our
today.
questions.
The questions packet is also within your materials. with all-
Yes, that was, we already received that. I think our questions are gonna be slightly different.
I'll get you a final version of the zoning documents.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, school department. Thank you for your patience.
Oh.
No.
Yes, it is.
Is it?
Yeah.
It feels.
It's on till 10. A lot of people.
I know.
Oh.
As we're getting seated, thank you for having us. I just want to thank Dr. Carmen Williams, Dr. Alexandra Montes McNeil, Ms. Mary Lammy, and Ms. Angelotti. The staff who really are the ones who are putting things together. Being I would start, just sort of a few high level points. So as the previous years, we've had liaison meetings with the schools. And Carol and Josh and I have had 3 of those meetings so far, and they've been incredibly helpful in giving us the information in the book that we all have, and allowing us to ask some questions and get some answers, and all of it's been very helpful and productive. So that process has been ongoing. I just before I turn it over to the superintendent and his team, just wanted to kind of make some high level observations or points. And I'm going to start first with enrollment, just to give people a flavor of that. This year in fiscal FY 24, the school year, there's in the school system, there are 5,547 students in FY 24, our current year. The projected budget for next year is based on an increase of 13 students. So that would be 5,560 is what next year's budget, the enrollment, is set to or triggered for. Kind of putting those numbers in context for folks, the high water mark pre-COVID was FY 19, where we had 5,728 students. It dropped down in FY 21 to 5,486 and has been increasing since then to the number I just said for this year, 5,547, and then the additional 13 for next year, 5,560. The town uses Dr. Jerry McKibben for its forecasting, and we've just gone through that process. And based on the forecasting and that he performs for the town, we're not projected to get back to the pre-COVID numbers until FY 35. So sort of the bottom line is that enrollment is essentially flat and has been flat and is projected to be flat over the next short term, up to the next 10 years. However, as you'll see that although the number of students might be flat in growth, the needs of those students and the services they require change and increase and challenge the schools every year. And I think you'll hear that some of the driving forces in this year's budget is a result of those needs and the ability and ways to address them. The FY 25 budget request that is put forth to us is for a 6% increase over the current fiscal year. And that equates to about $5.5 million required above and beyond what was in the FY 24 budget. About half of that increase is for bargain for salary increases under the collective bargaining agreements with the various constituencies that work for the schools, so teachers and aides, et cetera. And so that's about half of it is for salaries. About 25% of the increase is for out of district special ed tuition and transportation of those students. That equates to an increase of $1.4 million over the current year. And then the balance, 9% for student support positions, and then 11% for other positions and programs. So that's at high level what the makeup of the request is. One of the things that we've spent a lot of time on, and I know we'll continue to, is the out-of-district tuitions and the wide fluctuations that have occurred in that over the last several years. And again, kind of providing you all with context just so you understand the fluctuations that we've been experiencing here. In FY 21, the amount spent was $5.3 million. In FY 22, it went down to $3.6 million. In FY 23, it was at $3 million. The current year we're in now, fiscal year 24, it jumped up again to $5.2 million. And now it's projected in this budget for FY 25 to be $6.4 million. And so as you can see, there's wide fluctuations and substantial amounts of money, and certainly the increases over the last 2 years, jumping from $3 million in FY 23 to I'll double it, 6.4 million in FY 25. The discussion we've had is that really, if those increases continue, that they're not sustainable, and how can we address that, and what can we do about it? So I just wanted to kind of point that out to folks as one of the things that are driving our conversations, because it's a significant amount of money, and the increases are clearly big over the last several years. So those are sort of the main points that I wanted to point out, and then I'll turn it over to Dan and his team to.
I think we're done.
That's
it. I think Mr. Conley covered that well. All right, thank you for that.
Let me, we'll get right into it. Thanks, Dave, and go to the next one. John, shared with you the big picture on what we're looking for. A roughly 6% increase, about 9 staff members, $5.4 million over the current year. What I want you to know is our budget is built with our strategic priorities, and unfortunately, the graduate is the foundation for what we're doing. Every item in the budget can be tied to one of these priorities. That's important to the school committee as we build our budgets, because budgets really are a philosophy of what's important to you as a school system. There's several factors that drove this budget. John touched upon some of them. Enrollment, while it is down and has remained steady, that is a little different than what's happening with a couple of our neighbors. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Inflation continues to be an issue that we're dealing with. Talk about that in some detail. Salaries and contracts provide the biggest part of our budget. Compliance, we recently had an audit. We have audits all the time, but one of them for our English language learner program suggests that we need to ramp up some of our services. There are infrastructure needs regarding theater maintenance, school transportation, PIT systems, and then a very tiny amount was dedicated to program improvements. Let me highlight a little bit about enrollment. John is right. We dipped during COVID. That's the blue line. State did as well. It's kind of steadying itself, but it's going to take a while to get back to what was pre-pandemic levels. Communities like Newton and Wellesley are consolidating schools. Enrollment is changing. Ours is, at least it seems that it is leveling off, but certainly a factor in the budget development. Also, some context I want to provide that, compared to our peers, we have a higher ratio of students to teachers. Different ways to think about this. I think it's prudent about the staff that we have. And it's also a challenge to, continue to have these higher ratios. I want to talk about collective bargaining settlements for a moment, because there's a lot of news around those. It's a busy chart here, and you have the detail in front of you in hard copy. What I want you to know is that throughout the state, collective bargaining agreements are settling today and tomorrow at a much higher level than has typically been the case. I know right now that Newton teachers are discussing whether or not they will go on strike because they've not been able to settle their collective bargaining agreement. And I think these collective bargaining agreements on the far right, beyond to the right of Needham, really are going to start putting pressure on the FY26 budget and beyond. You can see some of those settlements have COLAs, a cost of living allowance of over 3%. And every district, by the way, has other different incentives built into their budgets, which are not captured on this slide. So when we think about not FY25, because that agreement has already been settled, but FY26, 27, 28, there will be pressure on the school budget for different kinds of agreements with our employee groups. And that's certainly a factor that we will have to consider as we move forward. I want to check in with you about demographics. I think you know this living in this community. The community continues to change with its racial makeup, its low income status as well, continues to grow the number of students. Also, the number of students who are considered English language learners, or whom their first language is not English, is growing. A look at some of those languages, our largest group, Spanish and Russian, Hebrew, Chinese, a growing number of Arabic, Ukrainian, Mandarin students as well. But those are your neighbors. Those are our students in the Needham Public Schools. Also, our special education demographics.
Separate out Chinese and Mandarin.
On this, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm not sure.
So it's Mandarin and then all other Chinese.
Maybe if it's Cantonese and
other
languages, yeah.
Okay.
Regarding special education students or special education population, generally, leveled. It's mirroring what the state levels for special education are.
And then let me get into some staffing with special education. We do provide great service for our kids. I'll talk about more specifics in a moment. And just as we do with classroom teachers, we have a higher ratio of special education students to special education staff than several of our peer communities. Our special education requests, as Mr. Conley noted, are a big driver in this budget, totaling about $1.7 million. And that includes some staffing for an ILC, or an intensive learning center. That's a program that mostly meets the needs of students with autism. There's some other students as well, but I think you can consider it that way. The SLP is a speech language pathologist. BCBA is a board certified behavior analyst and teacher assistants, and then some other positions here. We did the instructional assistants from the grant. We're losing support from the federal grant, so we have to build those students into our operating budget. The tuition increase and the transportation increase, all told for special education in this budget, it is a large request of just under $1.8 million. I want to very quickly, go ahead.
Just to clarify, the ILC was funded for this current year through special education circuit breaker funds, right?
Yes, if you go right there, that slide there, those teachers in the ILC, the Intensive Learning Center, are working right now. After the town meeting appropriated the budget, and we kind of settled down with what students we actually had registered and enrolled, it turned out that we needed to add an additional classroom for our ILC. And so we had to, outside the budget, hire this staff, but they were not part of the FY24 budget. So in order for them to continue working with those students, we would have to build them into the FY25 budget, which is why they're on this request.
And when you mentioned the federal grant that you were losing, which federal grant is that? For the teaching assistant?
We're not losing a grant. The grant, the funds are not increasing at the same rate that the salaries for the staff are.
Okay.
So we lost.
Thank you. Yeah.
We lost room for 3 different TAs.
Okay.
I wanted to really do a very quick special education 101, if you will. And I'll let you do a lot of the reading, but just want to highlight for folks even who are watching that we have a really strong special education program that we're very proud of, and that provides a wide variety of services for our students. And I think one of the things that many families don't know is that who do not have a child who's in special education, that program is developed by a team of parents, educators, and others who really sit down to try to figure out what's in that child's best interest, and together they collaboratively approach that. 90% of our students in special education who have IEPs, though, are fully included in classrooms. They're not set aside. They're not in different places. They're actually just going into classes, and they may be receiving some service outside the classroom, but most of them are included. We do, though, have some specialized programs within 4 of our elementary schools. And those specialized programs are like the language-based program, or LBC at Elliott, that provides some services mostly for students with language difficulties. Those students may also be assigned to a general ed classroom as well. So they may have 2 teachers, a classroom teacher and their LBC teacher. And this is true in the other programs in the district. The 5th elementary school, Mitchell, that does not have a specialized program, actually is the home base for our Walker Group Home students. The Walker School in district also has students who are not part of the Walker Education Program, but they are awaiting, in many cases, adoption. And so they attend the Needham Public Schools while they are living in Needham, where they are at Walker. The elementary kiddos go to Mitchell, where they receive a programming that meets their needs. Now, there are about 300 students each year who are eligible for special education services throughout the summer. We actually run a 12-month program, if you look at it that way. Most of our students attend school for the 10 months to 9.5 months of school, but we have other students, up to 300, who attend school throughout the summer. Within the operating budget, there are 247.7 full-time teachers, instructional assistants, psychologists, occupational speech therapists, and others who provide the service to over 900 preschool through postgraduate, because we do educate some students beyond their high school diploma to the age of 22. All of those students are serviced by these folks. Now, there are some students who do require services and education outside of the community. For whatever reason, we do not have the kinds of services that they require. We don't have the space. We don't have the particular program that they need. We will, and we do work with approved day or residential programs and some of our collaborative programs to provide the services that are listed: therapeutic or medical, educational. And right now, today, and sometimes it changes. So I'll say there are about 80 students. Sometimes it might move if a student is moved out of the district or if a student is coming off of services, but there are about 80 students who attend 57 day and residential programs in these schools throughout the Commonwealth. And there are a couple that are out of state as well. Now, John is correct. The FY24 budget is that about $5 million amount, but actually the total cost of the tuition is $8.3 million, and that's what's actually in the budget. However, the state, through a program called Circuit Breaker, reimburses us, often at a different rate, but generally around, I'll say 60 to 75% over the last few years for certain services. And so we receive in FY24 about $3.1 million through that Circuit Breaker program. So the actual cost is the $5 million plus that John talked about. Additionally, for students in day placements, we provide transportation, and that cost increases a bit. And for FY24, it's $1.7 million. I'll get a little bit more detail in a moment, but let me share with you that as you can see, that our out-of-district placements have stabilized over the last few years, the percentage of students. I attribute that to the great programs that are being built and designed and maintained in the Needham schools. I attribute that to the support of the school committee and the finance committee and town meeting for supporting some specialized programs over time, and to our staff who really are providing for the needs of those students in our schools. Let me share with you, though, what this private school tuition looks like and what some of the programs are. So Boston College, you may know, has a program on campus at Campion Hall. There are a variety. I set up to 57 programs out there. These are just some of them. And these are some of the day programs. And our current students who are enrolled, their tuition ranges from $37,000 on the low end to up to $179,000. Our residential students, many of whom are placed 365 days a year, not all of them, but some of them are. I shouldn't say many. Some are placed 365 days a year. Some are placed well over 200 days a year. And those tuitions run from $91,000 to a high of $481,000 in the current fiscal year. All of those costs for FY25 are escalated by the data that I'll share with you in a moment, but at least by 4.69%. Now, what happens with tuition, it's not something that we control, the cost of tuition. The governor's office has a wing, the Secretary of Administration and Finance, and that within Administration and Finance is kind of an obscure office, the Office of Operational Services Division. And that group, that office, sets tuition rates for approved private special education schools instant. And as you can see by the next slide, that over the last 2 years, they have, well, projected for next year, this year and next year, they have set rates at an unprecedented level of just under 19%. The average for the last dozen years before that was about 2%. For reasons that are not entirely clear, even to me today, and Ann and I have been very much and intimately involved in conversations with the state, with the governor's office, with the inspector general's office, with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. It's not entirely clear why all of this happened. It is important to note, and I want to say this right now before I forget, there are a lot of numbers on the page. But what I referred to earlier, we have kiddos, your neighbors, who attend these schools and families that you know. And it is extremely important that we provide services for those kids. And it's hard to talk about numbers without talking about those kids. But there are 80 kiddos who require services outside of Needham. And they have very unique needs that need to be met. And I don't mean to boil this all down to an equation or a number or some simple calculus, because it's not simple at all. We need to provide for those kids. We want to make sure that they are as much a part of the community as possible. and that they get a great education. And at the same time, that has to be balanced with how we can sustain this and how we can afford this. The state cannot continue to raise tuition rates, permit them to be raised at this level. And it's not just Needham, this impacts every community across the Commonwealth. I'll also hasten to add that there's another part of this that's a little tricky, in that special education schools can ask for an additional increase beyond this basic one. So in this current school year, every school got at least a 14% increase. For next year, it's planned a 4.69% increase. However, there are schools, two of the schools, and it happens that two of the schools that we send students to, Walker and Learning Prep, have asked for additional increases of up to 25% beyond this. So, and those have been, are planned to be granted. So you can see that where this could be going is suggesting that it is just hard to provide support for these kiddos who have these really serious and I'd say fragile needs. It's a bigger conversation than we could have here or even a town meeting. It's a conversation that requires state government to get involved with local districts to solve a problem that needs to be solved for every community. As an aside, Ann and I are working with administration and finance. We're working with the DESE, and we hope to, the Inspector General may also be able to work with us to explore this further. We're pushing, but it is a bit of a big stone to push uphill. So that is a huge factor in our costs related to our operating budget this year. I'll go back to the end, or well, I'll go back to the beginning, just tell you that you know what I said, David. This again is our request. It is a large request, just under 6%, just about 6%. This slide really shows that, you know, most, as John pointed out, are for contracts and negotiated contracts, and then the vast majority for level service, including that tuition, and a small piece for program improvements. Let me just quickly run through and show you that here are some of the staffing requests. I shared some of those with the special education staffing a few moments ago, but this is what they all add up to, the 9.15 FTEs for some classroom teachers, special education, and English language learner teachers, 0.8 to meet some compliance recommendations that we received. Further, some of the district resource requests include some subsidies for the athletic program transportation, avoid fee increases because we've been raising fees over the last several years. Also, replacement cycle for digital devices, some curriculum needs, substitute wages to keep pace with our neighbors, paper supplies, and things like that. We did work to look at what we have right now. Can anything be repurposed? And we were able to identify just about $250,000 to repurpose within this budget so that we could fund some of these things without not looking at different items, either people or programs that we could repurpose. So the operating budget does not meet all the needs that everybody identified, our principals and program directors. It's not possible. There are positions that were not included in this budget. There are programs, there are stipends, and support that we'll have to defer to another day. And that happens, we understand that. However, the budget does support sustainable wages for our staff. It builds capacity in our specialized programs. I mentioned the ILC for students to keep them in Needham where they belong, and quite frankly, where it's more affordable and efficient and better for our kids. It does fund the special education tuition. We did redirect some existing funds, and most importantly to me, all of it is aligned to our strategic priorities of plan. Now, if I may, the town manager, though, has asked that we consider some changes to our budget to balance with her recommended budget, which she hopes to share, which she will share with the select board next week. And so we have identified areas to reduce in our budget. The school committee has briefly discussed these. They'll discuss them again next Tuesday because they need to vote a budget plan next Tuesday evening. And I would suggest at this point that these be the items that might be reduced. The central office team is still looking at what other items or some other possibilities. We also identified, because the budget process happened so early, that we have a need in our preschool to increase the operating subsidy. We raised rates for families significantly last year. And I don't think it's wise to go back to raise rates again. And in fact, sometimes that creates a dynamic where if you raise them too high, folks won't come, and you further create a problem that leads to a larger program deficit. So these cuts add up to over $200,000, 240, but with preschool subsidy, it brings it down to a total reduction of about $176,000. Finally, what we're not discussing this evening, unless the chair would love to.
No.
Okay, thank you. Is a warrant article around technology. And just to kind of give you a heads up, we're going to talk about, I think, Madam Chair, sometime in February. We'll talk about this warrant article. You know that we've gone through the study, and there will be a warrant article that the school committee is discussing. We've been asked to vote on, and we move it forward to you and the town manager. About $934,000 to support those items on the screen there. With that as context, we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I'll first ask the liaisons whether they have any further comments.
So this is actually, we had a brief preview of the reductions yesterday. We didn't see the amounts. I guess, could you summarize the conversation with the town manager? Like, what are those reductions based upon?
I have no idea. I know that the town manager and I have been in constant communication, and you know, Kate is very good about saying, what do the schools need? Because I know that she uses that to guide what she is doing with the town. I know there are a lot of town needs as well. I haven't seen the budget plan, but I'm aware that there are a lot of needs in the town side. And I think Kate is unsure of the total amount of revenue available. And so she and I talked, we worked it out, and this is the reduction, about $170,000 she asked that we could achieve so that she could present if you will, a balanced budget next week.
Thank you.
All right, other questions, comments from finance committee members? Barry? No? You're on mute. He's shaking his head now.
No, I don't have any comments. Although, you know, Dan, as you think about this special ed budget, and I guess I know we're always trying to control as much as we possibly can, keep it in-house. Does it feel, it almost feels like you're losing some of that control to some degree? Am I misstating? I mean,
well, I don't know. I'm not sure it's your question, so I can't reframe it. I guess what I would say is that what we've been able to do through a lot of work of a lot of people around this table and our special education staff is stabilize the number of students who are going out of district. And I think that's really important, because we're keeping them in district where their families want them to be, where they should be with their peers in Needham, and at a better cost, a more efficient cost. But you're absolutely right. We can't control what the operational services division does. And I have to tell you, quite frankly, it is frustrating to talk to them. They don't have answers. They're silent on the phone. They refuse to provide. They've provided some data around Boston area workforce and how they came up with the calculation of raises, but of a percentage increase. But it doesn't mirror our experience with labor negotiations. And quite frankly, when they say that the schools are struggling, I don't disagree that they aren't. We don't want these schools to shut down because they're providing great services for our kids. But you go onto the website and they're offering $10,000 signing bonuses for some positions. The executive compensation is far different than the executive compensation in the public sector. So there's no doubt that some of these schools are struggling. For whatever reason, the state has decided to pick up the mantle of those programs and said they need a lot more money. They need it now, and it has to happen. And there's no negotiation. There's no conversation. It just happens.
One question I had that I didn't ask at the liaison meetings, and I apologize, but when they increase this tuition, do you get kind of an itemized increase, or is it a number? Meaning like Walker is increasing by X, Cushion is increasing by Y, is it?
It's really
Do
the
you
flatter, it's,
It's the flat amount you saw on the screen.
Yeah.
In the current year, everybody went up 14%.
yeah, there's no,
It's a
I
flat.
feel like you can't push back and say, show me what's behind that.
so this is the question that Ann and I have asked OSD. Can we be invited into a meeting to have a, just like we are invited into your meeting to have a conversation? And the answer is, well, we don't believe that. So everyone gets a flat increase regardless of the need.
Even for those schools that we structure, which get the increases that exceed the cost of living that you saw there on the slide, it's very opaque. There's no documentation provided. There's no itemization of need or expense on the behalf of the school. It's really.
The documentation provided is a letter from the school, usually the head of school, to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and OSD that says next year we have certain needs and we need to raise our rates by, they pick the number. And the OSD doesn't pick the number for the restructuring grant. The school picks the number. Sincerely. It's a paragraph long, and that's the only documentation available on the state's website or that we would be able to receive.
But to John's point, it's totally unsustainable.
Right, right.
But our hands are tied.
No, I think when you look at it and, you know, the new chart that was telling for me, this one about the collective bargaining settlements that are out there and what we're facing. And I do have a question just about sort of timing, looking over the next 9 months as to when that process is going to begin for you guys. But if you look, you know, so we know what this year's number is, we don't know what FY in 26 or 27 is going to be. And if, you know, if you look at what the potential could be, and then you look at these out of district tuitions going up the same way, it's, you don't have the money for it, right? And unless you do an override or something like that, and because it's going to be very, very, if they both go in a direction in that regard. So it is unsustainable. When you look at it, because it's just not that, it's just not the tuitions, it's other pressures that are going to be there as well. But with respect to the I mean, we don't know details, but just sort of general time frame as to when, you know, we're in this room a year from now. Are we gonna know what the increases are gonna be, will they be settled at that point in time?
No, we'll be just kicking, next year about this time, we'll be just kicking off the next round of negotiations with the teachers. And generally, I mean, the last 2 cycles, we haven't settled before the end of the school year. It's continued into the early part of the fall or the summer.
Yeah.
So
you'd be coming to us with a placeholder.
Correct.
In a sense,
Yeah.
a year from now, in this room, it would be a placeholder for what it would be, but it would not be a completed because your negotiations, as you say, just.
Well, and I mean, unless for some reason, there's nothing written down that it has to be about this time of the year, you know, it all depends, I think, Alex, on, you know, the union's ability to get the school year started and get organized and plan. We certainly, you know I'm interested in perhaps seeing if we can do that earlier. You okay with that? Thanks. But it depends, and it depends on, you know, it's a relationship and a partnership with the school committee and the unit aid, because that'll provide good information. We've been fortunate in that we have a strong partnership with the NEA. We have great teachers. They're thoughtful. They understand. They would not be surprised to see this, Dad, because Ann and Alex and the school committee presents them with a lot of detailed information on town finances and school needs and comps that are quite detailed. And so they get that and they understand that. However, it's a different environment out there right now. The Newton teachers, you know, they came out with, they're standing at about a 10.5% COLA over 3 years. Now, where that will land, I have no idea. But that's all part of what's going on in the neighborhood.
And COLAs are only one part of.
Yes, they are.
Total cost of the
They are.
contract, so.
Yes, they are. Yeah, they are. But that's the easiest thing to compare. for our purposes, because we just don't,
Right.
you know, all the different components.
Madam Chair. Mr. Kaufman, as you know.
Barry, did you have your hand up?
Well, actually, my question is very similar to John's, and you know, I've been reading a lot about what's going on in Newton, and I know, I'm just curious from your perspective, Dan, how concerned are you that and it's not just Newton. I know Wellesley's had a lot of issues as well, and other neighboring towns. And at least as long as I've been on this committee, we haven't had any serious issues. But how concerned are you about the ability to end up at a reasonable place?
Well, one would have to define reasonable, and so that's part of the conversation. You know, what is reasonable? Our teachers in Needham and our staff, they're smart, they're savvy, they're hardworking, and they really appreciate what the town does for them, not just in the paycheck, but in the facilities that are provided with the leadership and the models are sitting here around me that they have. And the support of families. So there are other components that I know that they appreciate that can't be measured on a chart like this one. And they're part of this environment. You know, some of them are, you know, would say, and I'm sure they are struggling as well. And they're not going to ignore what's going on in the neighborhood, if you will. That they're certainly going to pay attention to that, and they'll want to be part of that conversation. We do have a good relationship with the NEA. We do believe that they should be compensated fairly and according to comps. That's been, I think, a tool that you used, Andrea. We ask our staff to do a lot. Even on some of these earlier slides, our student staff ratio, even with these other districts with higher COLAs. I mean, when I think about special education staffing, our special education staffing is our teachers have twice as many students to deal with than they do next door in Wellesley, which pays very differently. So people are comparing, they're looking and wondering. Now, why anybody would want to teach and work in Wellesley, I don't know, but I know that there are a lot of good people who do. So it's a long-winded answer to say, it depends on what reasonable is. We'll figure it out. And there will be a cost to figuring that out in the budget.
Nicholas is in Wellesley.
As I said, good people.
Okay, yep.
Oh, could I summarize a conversation that we've been having for, I guess, the better part of a year about circuit breaker carry forward? So it's kind of nuanced. The state provides, as Dr. Kudikans mentioned, funds to offset the cost of special education. The state also allows those funds to be used in the current year when they're received, but also the following year. So we can carry over money from one fiscal year to the next, which makes the school department kind of an exception. No other department is allowed to do that. The reason why funds would carry over is if you couldn't expend all of them for some reason. So salary savings, for instance, if a position is vacant for part of the year, you can carry that money forward to the next year to spend it. So it's not lost in that sense. I guess during the discussions, we discussed the fact that through budget transfers throughout the year, there could be a salary savings in non-special education positions that could also end up being, those savings could also end up being carried forward to the next fiscal year. And so in that sense, I think we discussed that's being used to some extent as a contingency fund. I want to pause and just make sure I'm summarizing it correctly.
Yeah, I mean.
We don't currently have plans to carry forward funds. We don't know of need. It is a little early in the year. Sometimes those needs, such as the Newman ILC that we talked about a little bit earlier, aren't known until the summer. If we do have and can identify those things and have the availability to carry forward circuit breaker to try and address some of those issues, then we do try to do that, because as we've mentioned, our budget doesn't contain contingency for those classrooms that might happen. And they don't usually happen with enough advance notice to build them into a budget.
So how do you determine, when you have leftover money, how do you determine how much gets carried forward and how much turns back to the town at the end of the year?
It's based on the need that we have, that we can identify and what is reasonable, and after conversation.
We have
with the
conversations with
superintendent
the
and
finance committee, with the school committee. I mean, we've always been doing that.
So the needs are based upon, like, at the end of the year, what you've identified at the end of the year.
We had to hire 2 classroom teachers, which are part of this budget process. And the ILC, I mean, that's the bulk of the, what will now be a little under 9 FTEs, 8.9 or something. Once this $170,000, that happens. The bulk of those are the special ed and classroom teachers we hired to meet enrollment, I'll call it last June, after town meeting. So, and it's funny, so it's not really new. It's new to the budget. It's new to the budget. It's not new in the sense that the 9.15, the bulk of them are here.
About
7.8, yes. Yep. And so the thing I always come back to is, so they're not necessarily, they're new to the budget, but not new to the program. So the monies that's being spent on them this year, how are those monies being treated next year? If they're being made new for next year's purposes, how they're being paid this year, how is that money being allocated next year? Well, it doesn't exist unless it comes into the operating budget. Well, but it was here this year, maybe you're seeking 5 point something. Well, we are 5.39 more, so
I think
the money's there.
Savings and ongoing revenue.
So I guess, I struggle with it because it just seems like if we're funding them now, why do we need additional funds to fund them next year? Because the funds for those teachers are not in the current operating budget.
They're not recurring.
They're not, it was one time. Well, they are recurring because we're already saying that the base amount from last year is where we're starting from to increase for the next year. It's not. No, I'm not saying that. We started this increase of, well, it'll be just. Well, no, but I know you're not saying it, but that's what the effect of it is.
No, it's truly not. The base for FY 25 is actually the FY 24 adopted budget.
Yeah, and within that, there was monies available to pay, one-time monies available to pay those.
Mine is the one-time savings. So like you adjust for, I assume, salary saving.
If there's
so if you have
in June, if there's a senior person who leaves or resigns and a junior person who replaces them, we budget the junior person's salary.
So your salary savings.
Yes.
Those one time. So if you had $500,000
of
of salary savings that you're funding positions with, they do not carry forward into 25.
That's correct.
I think that's what they're saying.
The FTEs are all normalized though at the FY 24 document.
Circuit breaker seems to be carrying forward from year to year. And I forgot what was last year was high.
We can only carry forward for 1 year.
Right, but every year you're carrying forward.
If we
somewhere
have some funds available.
I think
Yes, we have for the last.
I'm not sure that there are any years that there hasn't been a carry forward.
It was 1.4 million carried forward from fiscal 23 to 24.
And then 1.4 was it? Okay, whatever it was.
Sorry. I guess the point is, it was very high during COVID because people had no idea what to expect. And then it's come down since then, but still over 50% of what was received that year is carried over to the following year.
Right. Thank you. So that's one that's not budgeted, John, you're right. That's $1.4 million. Yeah. Other questions? Okay.
Thank you very much. we're continuing, we're meeting again with our liaisons on the 30th. We're gonna start with capital. Yeah.
And the warrant article.
We've already started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm good. Good evening.
Good evening.
You go from the largest department to the smallest.
Well, you're not really the smallest in the operating budget.
I see.
Okay, the building design and construction budget request is contained in tab 2 of our book. Josh and I met with Hank, and I just said I'll present it, and then I'm sure we have supplement it, and any questions people may have, we'll go forward with. So in this current fiscal year, FY 24, the ongoing construction project is the Emery Grover building, which as you drive by, you can see is moving forward. My understanding is slated to be finished in the late summer, a little later. What, a little later? Okay. So it's scheduled to be finished in 2024. And that's what's under construction right now. Looking to next summer, the summer of 24, the Elliott School rooftop unit replacement work will take place. And then in the summer of 2025, the Broadmeadow School rooftop unit replacement will take place. So those are the known projects that have been funded as we sit here today on January 17th. Now, there's numerous projects that are have been studied, but are not yet funded. And a lot of those will impact this department on a going forward basis. And those include the Pollard School replacement feasibility study, a project or projects for the DPW, the senior center, or I guess they call it CAF, utilization, and whether that project would require work to go forward. Library had a utilization study, and then there's theater, sound, and lighting at the Newman High School, at the Newman School, the high school, and the Pollard School. So those are all projects that are not yet funded, but I think we'll be hearing more of them coming up. The FY 25 budget that is in our tab 2 contains the same 3 FTEs that currently are in the department. Hank, the senior project manager Ken, and then Catherine, who we're borrowing to do our minutes. So she's working above and beyond an FTE. She's an FTE and more. So thank you for that. The salary increase is about 1%, a little bit under 1%, and then expenses go up as well. So the total budget request is $357,022. You'll see that there's a DSR 4 request, which is to add an additional project manager at a salary of a projected salary of $118,000, $6,000 in expenses. And then not carried within the DSR 4, but separately in the town budget would be the benefits for that position, which are approximately $37,000. I think the question on the DSR 4 is really comes down to one of timing and when to include it into the budget when there are projects that are not yet funded. And so I think it's gonna, the real question on that is the timing of it and when the position will first be needed
if these projects in fact go forward or not. And so that is an introduction to the budget. If there's anything more you want to add to that?
No, you were very complete. I guess the one thing I will add is, as you may know, the MSBA has invited the town to participate on the Pollard project. The eligibility period starts on May 1st, but we will be, we have already been working with the school department to assemble the information associated with that. And the eligibility period can last up to 270 days, but we are attempting to accelerate that so that we could, in fact, get back onto the schedule that was part of the school master plan. And so there's a potential for asking for an annual town meeting in April for the funding for feasibility. And we are still working through those details, both with the superintendent and the town manager. But that invitation, as you may recall, to participate with the MSBA comes with the potential for some fairly significant reimbursement on the project. And I think at Sunita Williams, it was a little bit more than 20% at the end of the day. The number, and the MSBA has also been increasing their cost per square foot reimbursement. Still not keeping up with the total cost escalation of projects, but it's at least acknowledging that they are getting more expensive.
So, Hank, within the 270 days or at the 270 days, what are the things that have to be, what are the deliverables to the MSBA?
There is. Sorry, the ICI, the initial. The initial compliance certification, and that is something that the select board, the superintendent, the school committee have to sign on to an agreement that says, yes, we will work with the MSBA, we'll work within your rules. It's the beginning of their process. Then a school building committee needs to be formed. The core of that would be the PBBC, but there are some other members that would need to be added, including the director of building maintenance, likely one person from this committee, as we did with Sunita Williams. And then within those, and then obviously the somebody from the school committee has to be on, and it would really be up to the school committee who that additional person would be from, the whether it's the superintendent. The principal is also supposed to be part of the school committee, and so the town would have to form that committee and present the credentials to the MSBA. There's an educational program, an enrollment process. A lot of that information and material is already available, as you have seen from the Kibben reports. And then there's a summary of maintenance and capital planning that the town submits. You may recall from Sunita Williams, we got 2 additional points. The maximum allowed. 2 additional points means 2 percentage points in reimbursement, and so it means millions of dollars. And then the local funding authorization has to meet their language criteria and the vote associated with completing that eligibility period. We have been having some discussions with them. And it would be possible to have that vote occur in May.
So that would be a vote to fund a feasibility study?
Correct. That's the first step in the process. And then once we overcome that hurdle, we get a formal acceptance to move into module 2. Module 2 is forming the team. They have to agree to the OPM. They have to, we work with them to appoint the designer. And then after we get through that hurdle, then we start the feasibility study. And there are 2 steps, and there's the preliminary development program, PDP, and the PSR, where they look at various options associated with the project. And you may recall under Sunita Williams, we not only looked at the location within Hillside, but we also looked at alternate locations around town, ultimately finding the Owens Poultry Farm as a viable site.
So the feasibility say, how, do you have an estimated amount of what's gonna be requested and what is, how is that arrived at and what are the components of it?
In the capital, 5-year capital plan, there is a number of 3.95 million. We are working with the school department and with town manager and talking to designers and others and looking at examples from other municipalities to try to come to the right number. We think we can come well in under that. But we're still in the process of sorting that out.
Okay. So you'll have that for when we get to our capital items?
Yes.
Okay, just because I think we're gonna really wanna know. Well, obviously, what the number is, how it's arrived at, what the deliverables are gonna be for it. And what's actually the work that's gonna take place for it, because, you know, how much of it would be going to the designer, whoever's doing the study, how much would be going to, OPM, whether we do it in-house or externally, how much is projected to go to other places, so. Obviously, we're not looking for that information now. I'm just trying to give you a heads up of, we're gonna be wanting all those things when we get to that discussion.
Yeah, and what
You're probably only a month away from it.
Yeah, I mean, and we have been trying to dig as deep as we can into reference documents. And also, as you're aware, we've had Dorn Whittier doing the school master plan, and they've been very helpful. We've also been consulting with Gill International, who we have on an on-call contract. And we would need to bring in an independent cost estimator in the early phases. But I think we're also recommending that we bring in, during schematic design, bring in a CMR, construction manager at risk, because the site will be occupied during construction, and it'll be multi-phased addition, renovation, unless we find another farm in town that can accommodate a new middle school. It'll be a complicated project, and I think we would benefit by having a CMR as part of the looking at logistics, looking at being the secondary cost estimator, and looking at things like prefabrication. How do we accelerate the schedule? The more we can accelerate the schedule, typically we're saving on those cost escalation numbers. From start to finish, the normal MSBA project is about a 7-year process from eligibility phase all the way through to occupancy. And now they've added this project completion, where they come back. They just visited the Sunita Williams School, reviewing what works, what doesn't work, and it helps inform them on all their future projects. I think that we had the senior study, which was the first step. Prior to the invitation, MSBA sent a group of their senior staff to look at the Pollard School. And that meeting went very well, obviously, because we ended up getting invited. But I think they also saw the needs associated with that school. As you well know, the modular classrooms are little over 21 years old. Band-aids, is that how you keep them together? And if there isn't, movement in replacement, a lot of the old systems are just falling apart. So there's, I think it's very encouraging that the invitation from the MSBA did come through. We didn't know whether it'd be this year or, the next year. But if it were next year, then, that'd be another year of cost escalation that we'd have to factor in. I can lean on Catherine if you want, but all the information associated with the MSBA core program is on their website. I'm sure some of you have already seen that. These are just a few printouts that I use as a reminder.
So let me just ask a question about the DSR part. Let's assume, just the purposes of my question, that the only of the projects I mentioned, the only one that goes forward at town meeting is the feasibility study for Pollard. So we have that, but none of the other ones. And then just focusing on the time period of July 1, 2024 to June 30, 2025. And we have, design and does a feasibility study. What would be the need for an additional person in that 12-month period if that was the only project that was, you have Emery Grover coming off in September of 24. The rooftop units, or one's going to be done already, and the other one's just the following summer. So what would be the need for a person in that 12-month period if the only project funded or approved was the Pollard feasibility study?
Well, when I was working through I'd say at this point, I'm putting a significant amount of my time into the eligibility period deliverables and coordinating those with the school department and also with the building maintenance department. And your question is, do we need that other senior project manager? The Emery Grover project, we have run into found conditions. It'll probably be causing a 3-month delay from our original completion date. And so Ken will likely have to be on site.
So 3 months beyond September or 3 months from this spring?
We're still negotiating on that. We think that substantial completion would be the end of September. But as you know, the school department, fortunately, we don't have kids moving in. School department is well situated in Hillside. We haven't gone into the detailed discussions of the phase move-in associated with the Emery Grover. September is a very busy time for them. So it's likely that it would be phased in October, November, or they may want to wait all the way until December. We will be getting new furniture. So the old furniture will be left behind at Hillside. And the IT department remains at Hillside until a new home is found for them. So I think Ken is largely engaged on that site through the end of the year.
But that's not 40 hours a week of work. I mean, you obviously go to a meeting, but you don't sit there. He's not sitting in Emery Grover 40 hours a week. He's obviously conducting meetings and doing the weekly walkthroughs and whatnot, but it's not like
he's doing 2 or 3 times a day walkthrough, dealing with all the various issues on the site, and also, coordinating on the, change orders and those other things.
Yes, but most of that, as I said, though, that's really gonna be done by this summer. And so go back to my question, okay? So which is what I'm trying to figure out is if you just have this feasibility study and you have Emery Grover, for purposes of my question, wrapping up, what would this additional person, why is she or he needed for just those 12 months of July 1, 24 to June 30, 25?
Well, if we are able to accelerate the eligibility period and bring it within 90 days to complete that, we would then be going through that selection process, which means advertising and interviewing and all the rest of that, and then getting into the PDP as soon as possible, ideally by September, October of this year. When I was going through that process on Sunita Williams, I was pretty much full-time on that one project. I was completing off other projects, but it was it's a full-time job.
So I think what might be helpful, and I think we had this once before, is a chart kind of indicating what the anticipated number of hours for the projects that are currently ongoing and the anticipated numbers for other projects.
Yeah, well, that's why I was trying to,
Yeah,
and I was
yeah,
just posing,
and I know we
because I think the
we've seen it
challenge,
before,
like,
yeah.
quite honestly, just speaking, not asking
Yeah.
a question, but just speaking. The challenge with DSR4 is in concept, I understand it.
Yeah.
It's the timing part that I'm wrestling with, and when we don't, especially if it turns out that there's a whole bunch of projects that are all approved in May, then that's one thing, but if it's just one or maybe none, that's another thing, and if we have it in the budget already, and that person might end up being underutilized, that's not good for anybody.
No, I fully appreciate that.
So I think that's the part that we're just trying to, and I think it would be helpful to answer that question or think that through, to just understanding if you were deploying someone, what hours would be required. And again, you can't be exact, I understand, but assuming the feasibility study was approved in a town meeting, whether it's 3.9 or some other number, what is it that you would forecast to do work on that? Your hours, Ken's hours, and then if there's a third person's, how it would be allocated.
Well, in the current capital plan, we are anticipating that phase 1 of the DPW project, which would be the fleet maintenance, would get design funding also in May 10 meeting. We're also anticipating that the library phase 1 teen and tween area would get funding, and so we'd be initiating design on that. And there's at a minimum, I think, the school theater sound and light project, the SAC 2 items would potentially get funded, and there's discussion about other theaters.
It almost begs the question though, right? Because if those things are all anticipated you're asking for one person, if they don't happen, it's obviously, it's less than one person would be required if it was just Pollard.
It typically takes at least 3 months. It's taking you a year to find a project manager. So I don't think it's going to be an easy process to hire somebody who has the qualifications that we would be looking for. And we wouldn't even advertise it until we knew which projects were moving forward. So it's likely that individual wouldn't come on board until fall of 2024 at the earliest. Meanwhile, we're juggling these others, and because we have the ability to proceed with the designers, if we can come to terms on fees, designers who've completed the feasibility studies on DPW and library and sound and lighting, I mean, they're all very familiar with the task at hand, and I think we can come to terms, and so we could move forward rapidly on that process for the design work associated with each of those projects.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. I have nothing additional.
Okay, well, for me, a table would be helpful, understanding what the time requirements would be for the various projects.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's what's your question about. I mean, I think you received an earlier version of this. Which was our projects.
Is this an updated version?
This is slightly updated because it eliminated the option D1A for the school master plan. Because
I
think it was attached to the capital plan. I'm not sure. In any case,
I think I have a copy.
And so you're right, if only one project of all of those projects get funded, then our needs are very different. If all of those projects get funded, then none of us can afford to live in this town.
But I think that, the chart we had before actually was by person, right?
Yeah, and I don't have that.
Okay, yeah, I understood. I think it'd just be helpful.
Yeah.
And I think, Hank, you don't have to go, I think just focusing in on really from July
Yes.
1 of 24.
Yeah.
I think over the next, certainly 12 months, no more than 24 months from then. Just focus on that time period. So you don't have to tell us what the hour requirements in 2028 or 29 would be.
You know, it'll be a very broad brush.
Great.
Yeah,
Like it
yeah.
was before.
More than helpful, thank you.
I know. It's roll call vote, so we don't have to. All right, and does anyone else have another question?
Congratulations to you and the school department for being invited to the MSBA program.
I think we're excited about that.
Unexpected.
Yeah. And there are, it's the 19 districts that were invited, and they broke it into 3 groupings. So we're in the middle grouping. And because we weren't invited in the first grouping, they're just trying to catch up.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we have finance committee updates. Oh, did we lose Barry?
Man, no, I'm here.
Hi, we just can't see you anymore.
I can see you.
Okay.
Just confirming something here now. Yeah. This is finance committee. Just so that everybody sees.
That's what I thought, that we put the charter review on here, but it wasn't on.
Yeah.
The printout, and I thought I
version,
must
but
have
posted
forgotten.
online,
Okay,
which is ILR charter review.
wonderful. All right, so everyone should have received a copy of the charge that the Board of Selectmen put together for the Town Charter Review Committee. They are looking for a finance committee member appointment. I did ask a couple of follow-up questions on what exactly the outcome would be. And the outcome is to try to put together language for a warrant article. Is that a warrant article? Yeah, it's a warrant article and a home rule petition.
In order to create.
Yeah, to create a official on schedule charter and bylaw review according to some schedule that this group will come up with. So they're looking for a member of the committee. The group does meet on the same nights as the finance committee at 5:30. I personally don't understand how the group can be limited to just 2 meetings that would be an hour and a half each and review everything that's on that charge. But that's just me. So I am looking for interest. I personally have some interest, but would like to know if anybody else would be interested in this. Given
I
everything
think
else
if
that
you
we're
wanna do
working
it.
on. I do
Yeah.
want, this one I am definitely interested in. Some of the other ones,
yeah.
yeah.
If that's the case,
You were interested,
go
if that's
Right.
the
I
case, then
just-
I
but
propose
I-
that you be our person.
But I will say, Carol, you will probably have to start the finance committee meeting.
That's fine,
On
but
both those
I
evenings
couldn't
because,
fulfill the 5:30 thing, so.
Okay.
That's fine.
okay, all right, okay. Good, and we'll see what comes out of it. It looks like it's going to be a very busy annual town meeting this year.
What's the date of it? I shouldn't even ask that, but.
Oh, I just wrote it down.
What? First Monday in May.
Okay.
The 6th, May 6th.
May 6th.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna come very fast. All right. So, finance committee updates. And I don't think I need to go for that. We have consensus, we're good. Finance committee updates.
Hey,
Yes?
Louise, when is the DPW gonna come in?
DPW is coming in next week. And you, Paul and I should coordinate, because there's a lot to present, so we'll do that. We'll
All
assign
right,
that.
I'll still be away. I should be able to attend remotely.
Okay, no problem. All right, we'll coordinate. All right, finance committee updates, Josh?
Tomorrow is the second workshop, public workshop for the home committee, Needham Housing Committee. And there will be an opportunity for public feedback, both in the format of a survey as well as just open mic to speak. So it starts at 7 tomorrow at Powers Hall in Town Hall.
And where are the materials?
There are materials on the website, the town website.
Okay.
And there will be maps presented at the meeting as well. You can join, actually, I should say it's in Powers Hall in person, but you can also join over Zoom as well.
Are those maps updated to what they showed the first time?
Exactly, they're slightly different than the first time. There are 3 scenarios that are being presented. One is a minimally compliant scenario that complies with the MBTA, MBTA Communities Act. There's and then gradually more expansive proposals. So they're all centered around the junction, Needham Center and Needham Heights stations.
Because they have to be.
Right. Well, not 90% of the required housing has to be within a half mile of any of the 4 train stations. There's no, and the 3 proposals don't have any proposed zoning changes for the area within a half mile of Hershey. So it's just those 3 areas, and I think it's close to 100% of the housing that would be allowed is within those half miles.
And the Linden Street doesn't do incremental units, doesn't do anything to satisfy the MBTA communities. Because it's not.
Okay, so that geography is excluded from the proposals, the 3 scenarios that are being proposed. In terms of compliance?
In terms of compliance is really my question.
I believe the answer is that because it's restricted by income, that it would not comply. That's my understanding.
Yeah.
That seems counterintuitive to me.
Yeah, to me too.
Well, sorry, so the other component is age, but my understanding is that there's going to be a warrant article proposed to remove the age restrictions at Linden Chambers. So if that were to pass, I do not know if age restrictions would be a factor anymore.
Interesting, okay.
Thanks.
And if someone can't attend, they can send.
Oh,
Comments
comments
and-
are absolutely welcome.
And
They're being
is the
sent to,
timeline for the committee to,
right, well, so comments can be sent to, what was it? Planning@needhamma.gov. There will be a third workshop in March, I believe. I forget the exact date. Where there'll be more feedback. The proposal, by the end of April, the committee's aiming to have a proposal that they can then send to the state for review. Kind of a pre-review to make sure it's compliant. Then it would be sent back to the planning board for the drafting itself. They would have their own hearings, and then for the October special town meeting, there would be the final proposal would be proposed to town meeting in October.
okay, and is there a cost estimate being developed for what the cost would be of the changes in zoning?
The consultants that the planning department hired did an operating costs estimate. They did not do any capital cost estimates. I have asked the director of the deputy town manager for operations to provide some sort of not necessarily dollar estimates, but thresholds at which, beyond a certain number of residents, you may have to upgrade certain infrastructure. So we won't have that certainly for tomorrow.
Yeah.
We will probably have that later on in the process. I'm hoping by April. I can ask for a clearer timeline.
Okay. All right, other finance committee updates?
I'm on the quiet zone working committee, and we have our next meeting on Monday.
Okay, and Lars, I forget his last name.
Yeah.
Asked that he be allowed to speak with the finance committee. I'm gonna allocate him approximately 10 minutes. He sent me some documents. There are way too many of them for the finance committee to look at now. But I think he was just looking for some initial feedback from the committee. So we'll do the same thing as we did with the housing authority. We'll get the materials ahead of time. If it's too much, John will, jump in as he did today, which is helpful. Otherwise, if we can discuss a few things with him, that'll be great. And we anticipate something on the warrant this year. You don't know. You can't tell yet.
It's to be determined.
Okay, all right, well, it should be a fun town meeting. Anyone else have any other updates? All
I
right,
move we adjourn.
Second.
all right, roll call, Barry. Adjournment.
Yes, yes.
Terry,
Yes.
Josh,
Yes.
Todd,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Chair votes yes. It's unanimous. We are adjourned at 9:09.